Hello, friends. Welcome to the show. It's a beautiful day today, isn't it? I'm your host, Zach McDaniel, and this is Screen Pass. So let's get into the top performances of last week. I got three for you. We're going to start off with number one, John Wolford, the quarterback out of Wake Forest, threw for 363 yards, and he had three touchdowns through the air. He also ran for 136 yards and three more touchdowns. He did all this despite losing their leading receiver, Greg Dortch, for the season due to an abdominal injury. Now, dating back to 2000, there's only been one other instance of a quarterback throwing for at least 360 yards, rushing for at least 135 yards, and scoring multiple touchdowns via both ground and air. This one quarterback was Johnny Manziel against Louisiana Tech in 2012. All right, number three. I think that was number four. But anyways, the next one, Wisconsin's defense. Nathan Stanley, quarterback for Iowa, threw for 5 touchdowns the previous week against the Buckeyes. This week, he completed just 8 for 24 passes for 41 yards. If you factor in the 4 sacks that he took, he only had just 6 yards of total offense. Iowa's running backs, Wadley and James Butler, combined for just 53 yards as the Hawkeyes were held without a single rush that went for 10 or more yards. They didn't even have a pass that went for 10 or more yards. They only had 66 yards of total offense and only had 5 first downs in the game. Incredible performance by Wisconsin's defense. Number 2, Rodney Anderson, running back for Oklahoma. He rushed for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns on 23 carries and caught 5 passes. Just 5 for 139 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had 4 touchdowns before the half was even over against TCU. The number 1 performance for last week, you got it, the U, baby. The U is back. I don't know about the U being back, but that's what they're saying around town. They had the number 12 scoring defense going into the night, having allowed an average of 17.6 points per game. But Saturday, wow, against Notre Dame, a very good team. They were number 3 at the time. They had 3 interceptions. They recovered a Notre Dame fumble and held the Irish to 6 of 16 on third down conversions. Against the run, Notre Dame had 3 yards a carry and just 108 yards on the ground. Miami is the first FBS team to force at least 4 turnovers in 4 straight games against Power 5 opponents since at least 2004. The Canes have the best turnover differential among Power 5 conference teams. I think it's safe to say the U is back. They have already clinched the Coastal Division. They will play Clemson in the ACC Championship. All right, let's move to our not top performances. And number 3, I got 3 for you. Number 3 would be Tennessee. Missouri, man, they put 50 points on Tennessee. They had 433 rush yards on the Vols. And this might not be Tennessee fans. You know, they might be happy at this news, but Butch Jones has been fired. Uh, uh, so sigh of relief for the Tennessee fans. Uh, he's done, but a terrible performance by Tennessee. Number two, we have Saquon Barkley's Heisman hopes. Uh, he was the front runner like a month ago. You know, he kind of disappeared in those two losses. He had two touchdowns, uh, but after that, he really disappeared against Ohio State, and then after Michigan State, he didn't really show up, and then against Rutgers, he didn't even show up there. Uh, it was just against Rutgers. Yeah, they won like 34-6 or something like that. Uh, but he only had 14 carries for 35 yards, even though he had two touchdowns. But he was shut down for the most part. Uh, his Heisman hopes are basically not there. He's not going to win the Heisman, especially with Baker Mayfield, quarterback out of Oklahoma, uh, just tearing it up every week. All right, not top performance. Nebraska. They're kind of tied with Tennessee in, I guess, terms of coaching. I guess Mike Riley and Butch Jones. Butch Jones has already been fired, but uh, Mike Riley's probably going to be the next big name that gets fired. Uh, but man, they got pushed around by Minnesota. Uh, they allowed 409 rush yards to an average Minnesota team. Uh, so Nebraska's probably not going to make a bowl. Mike Riley's one of the worst or one of the most unsuccessful coaches to ever coach at Nebraska. So yeah, there's that. All right, let's move in to the upsets. Number three. We're going to start off with number three. Well, there's not really an order, but right here we got Virginia Tech at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech upset Virginia Tech 28-22. Virginia Tech they were supposed to be they were gonna win the ACC, you know, all that, or their division anyways. But last week's loss, or the week before's loss to Miami, and now Georgia Tech. Kind of disappointing for Justin Fuente's group. Notre Dame at Miami. Miami just shocked the world, I guess. This wasn't as big of an upset. Both teams were top 10 teams. But it's just the way that Miami took care of business. They won 41-8. They just dominated Notre Dame in every facet of the game. And number one, Washington at Stanford. Stanford took care of business. They won on a Friday night, 30-22, and the Pac-12's playoff hopes are just about done for with Stanford, three-loss Stanford, expected to be the winner of their division, and then two-loss USC expected to be the winner of their division. Probably not going to be a Pac-12 team in the playoff conversation. All right. Now let me give you my top four for the playoffs. I guess I could talk about who's going to win the top four, or who's going to be there, or who I think should be there right now. But I guess right now, I'll talk about right now. Number one, Alabama. Number two, Clemson. Number three, Miami. Number four, Oklahoma. What I think will happen, that's just my top four right now, but what I think is going to happen in the future, number one is going to stay, Alabama. They're going to beat Auburn. maybe. I don't know. They didn't really look that good against Mississippi State, but I don't know if they get their linebackers back because they got a lot of injuries uh, at the linebacker position. If they get those linebackers back, I think they'll be in good shape because they didn't really look good, as I said, against Mississippi State. But I think they'll beat Auburn and then beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. Now, number 2 and number 3, Clemson and Miami play in the ACC championship. Uh, I think Clemson's going to win that game. Miami hasn't played a team on the road with a winning record. I think maybe the best team they played on the road would be Florida State, and they're 3-6. Uh, so yeah, number 2, Clemson, and then number 3, Oklahoma will probably move up maybe if they don't lose another game. They still got West Virginia next week, and then the Big 12 championship game, which would be TCU or Oklahoma State or maybe Iowa State. Uh, if I was the Sooners, I would hope it'd be Iowa State, to get revenge maybe. Whereas if they played TCU or Oklahoma State, they're going to be looking for revenge, and it is tough to beat a team twice. And then number 4 will probably go to the Big Ten champion, which would either be Ohio State or Wisconsin. Could be Michigan. Michigan has, ever since they lost 2 games, people have just kind of dumped them off. But it could happen. They play Wisconsin this weekend. They could beat Wisconsin, beat Ohio State the weekend after, and then take care of business again, beat Wisconsin again. And I think they will be number 4, maybe, perhaps. Or Ohio State, all they got to do, beat Michigan, beat Wisconsin, 2-loss Ohio State could be in there. Or Wisconsin, who is currently undefeated, beat Michigan, and then beat Ohio State. So I think one of those 3 teams could get in at that number 4 spot. There's a lot of questions surrounding Wisconsin's schedule, but they shouldn't worry about it. An undefeated FBS team will have to be put in there, no matter the schedule, or not FBS, Power 5 team. But they still got to beat Michigan and Ohio State. And now let's move on to the top games of this coming up week. It's basically cupcake week. Everybody scheduled cupcakes before the rivalry game, the rivalry games next week. So let's start off with number 5, a rivalry, one of the few that is not really cupcake games, even though one of them is trying to get bowl eligible, UCLA. UCLA at USC, Josh Rosen versus Sam Darnold, potential number 1 versus potential number 2 pick in the NFL draft. I'm going with USC. They got too much firepower. Even though I do think Josh Rosen is the better quarterback, I'm gonna go ahead and pick USC. Number 4, Navy at Notre Dame. Notre Dame got just dominated last week at Miami, but I think they bounced back this week. I'm taking Notre Dame at home. Number 3, TCU at Texas Tech. They're saying Kenny Hill might not play. I think he's got a concussion or something like that. But, oh, that's cool. Anyways, but Kenny Hill might not play that's not going to matter. I'm still taking TCU, but Texas Tech is a very good team, an underlooked team, underrated, uh, but I'm still taking TCU. Number 2, NC State at Wake Forest. Tough. One team is ranked, the other team is not, but John Wolford of Wake Forest has looked phenomenal. And I'm going to go with Wake Forest. I'm taking Wake Forest to beat the Wolfpack. It's at Wake Forest. I think they take care of business there. John Wolford's going to be the difference in that game. And number 1, the game of the week, Michigan at Wisconsin. We just talked about this game a couple minutes ago. Michigan made a quarterback change a couple of weeks ago. Brandon Peters is now their quarterback, and I think they've averaged about 35 points per game ever since he's been announced as the starting quarterback. But this is probably the toughest defense he's faced since he's been the starting quarterback. Wisconsin's defense is too stingy. I got to go with the Badgers for this one. I think Wisconsin will be too much for Michigan. All right, that is it for this episode of Screen Pass. Make sure you follow Screen Pass on Twitter at screen_pass. Whenever there's not a show for that week, I'll post my game picks, I guess. I'll just post a bunch of stuff like that. But yeah, that is all for this episode. I will see you next week.